Hey guys, the podcast will always be free. If you go into the description or the top comment, there's a locals, a Patreon, a Buy Me a Coffee, a Cash App, a PayPal. Legitimately, $1 a month makes the world of a difference. And I know you're thinking, no, it doesn't. It literally does. It keeps the show going. It's why it's so free flowing and hectic and frankly unprofessional and vulgar, but it's the reason why it's free and why it's fun. Please, if you can, donate $1. Thank you. One. And we are recording on Monday, January 26th, 2026 at 2:01 p.m. Eastern Time with Colonel Watkins, Colonel Murray, and Mr. Ian Burlingame. And General Holt might be joining us later. We don't know for not. As I was just saying to Steve, it seems like you cycle the guns in your background because two times ago was, I think, a lever action. I don't remember
Uh-huh.
what it was last time.
Yeah.
This time you've got some throwback shoot a grizzly bear and then also maybe shoot like
That's not
a
a throwback. That's a muzzle loader. That's a musket.
That's the EIB rifle.
That's right.
well, if that's not a throw, but then I don't know any. You know what? I'm already, you know what? Colonel Watkins is the only one on my good side right now by virtue of the fact that she just hasn't said anything. The other two are bullying me. So immediately it's hostile, much like Minneapolis. So that's what we're just going to jump into immediately because so many people have messaged me, emailed me, asking to do an episode with you guys about what is happening. And I feel like we have been doing these, but obviously it's changing on the ground daily. I don't really know what's going to happen. On one hand, I think Clay pointed out if Trump might blink. I hope to God he doesn't. On the other side, I have no idea what's going on. It's an absurd time to be alive. So everybody go in the description. Please go follow their Twitters, websites, all that stuff, merch and YouTube and Substack and blah blah blah. Colonel Watkins, could you start this?
So obviously, from my perspective, um, and I know I sound like a broken record when it comes to these types of events, but there's so many fingerprints of Operation Gladio insurgencies in what's going on in Minneapolis. The layers of complicity within the government, the funding sources, all of it. Um,
Media. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And you can't get away from that fact. And I think what a lot of people miss is that institutionally in the United States and throughout the Western um, governmental entity, basically NATO, in its original form, created the impetus for all of this. There are institutions in the United States. I posted this morning about the Albert Einstein Institute. It was one of the first things I found 3 years ago that was made up of Gene Sharp. And he has a very nefarious background and a special forces colonel that institutionalized how these insurgencies would be ran under quote unquote peaceful. None of them ended up being peaceful. And how they flood the zone with people. Every tenet of what's going on, you can go to and it's still up. I just checked this morning. Albert Einstein Institute has videos of lead young people bragging about overthrowing their governments using the principles that are taught at the Albert Einstein Institute, which, by the way, was funded by CIA and USAID. And for those of you who keep blaming all of the Democrats, the International Republican Institute was one of the primary funders of the Albert Einstein Institute. This has nothing to do with right or left. This has everything to do with this attempt to control who runs governments.
It's the oligarchy. This is the oligarchic Praetorian mechanism. This is Rome. We learned all this shit from the Romans. It's, the Jesuits, what are Green Berets? They're just Jesuits who didn't go get frocked. Right? We learned all this shit from the Catholic Church. They're good at it. The Romans. That's the Romans. Right? I say this, somebody went to Jesuit schools, right? And I was very serious. I thought I wanted to be a Jesuit priest. That was the path. And then I didn't go down that pathway, but I did end up as a Green Beret. And I was like, wow, a lot of this stuff sounds familiar, right? We go to the schoolhouse to do these very types of operations. That's the role of the Green Berets.
And isn't it weird? At least it is for me, having done so much research into the CIA, how many people, not even just in the CIA, but their contractors, like I've just been doing a real deep dive into Robert Mayhew. So many of those people started out thinking they were going to be a priest.
Yes.
And they will drop out of seminary and end up in the CIA or that line of work. The analogy there is just like part of this entire puzzle.
Because it's a belief system. You know, the folks that do that kind of work, it's a belief system. They believe that they are the power, and this is how real power works, and this is how they shape the world. But who owns them and who controls them ultimately is the oligarchy, right? It's the Praetorians. This is all about when a regime breaks down, you have to take the country to civil war. You have to take it to civil war and conflict. It's not, cooing the power structure isn't enough anymore, because the narrative, the artificial reality that all of the self-enslaving and thievery that's been going on for, usually a couple centuries, all of the lies that sustain that slaver system, that self-enslaving enslavement system, are breaking down. So what do you have to do? You have to kill off a bunch of the people. And what do you do? Well, I wrote this piece this morning about, the highest status of Christianity is martyrdom. And that's very much heavily in Western society. What do you do? Well, you send in all the people who want to be martyrs, whose only opportunity to earn status in the world at all is to become a martyr. And that's this guy got shot yesterday. That's the chick in the car. That's, you flood the zone with these types of people who are there to be martyred.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's the only status they will ever have in their life. And they'll willingly give up their lives. They'll willingly create a situation where they get shot so that they become a saint.
Absolutely.
In the resentful system, as I wrote about in The Eternal War. Yeah, sorry, Steve, go ahead.
And all of the messaging, you're spot on, man. All the messaging around it, like the little parade, the procession with the flag draped gurney, everybody saluting, even though most of them are retards. The point is they're doing the whole procession and the messaging around making the guy a martyr. It's exactly what they did to George Floyd, exactly what they're doing right now. It's the same script over and over and over and over again. But the other thing I'm seeing too is the narrative being amped up by all of the controlled assets, like the seditious six. You and I were talking about it this morning. So EM and I were trading texts this morning. We were vehemently agreeing with each other and disagreeing at the same time. And I think both sides are being played. When you look at the messaging on both sides, they're both being played. The DHS is being directed to take action. The left is being directed to take action. I mean, and, we all posted that post about the insurgency this morning, which it really is an insurgency at this point. And I'm curious to see what the FBI is going to do. They know where the money's coming from. They know exactly where it's coming from. They know who's behind it. They know who the leaders are. They know who's making the phone calls. They know exactly who is directing actions. All they got to do is go roll those guys up. This stops. That's all they have to do. So
it was always going to go this place, though, because it has to. Unfortunately,
I agree. Yeah.
Right. Unfortunately, what happens when you are in a late stage insurgency, and that's where we are. People can go look. The Green Beret documents, guidebooks and materials are all online as well. Like Colonel Watkins saying, right. We were established in 1952 to do these very things around the world. That's what the Green Berets were created for. Wasn't supposed to be the CIA, by the way. They weren't supposed to have operational assets. And Eisenhower and Kennedy and others tried to remove it from them. And even Reagan tried to stop some things, and they shot him. This is a classic stage 5 build up to stage 6 utilization to active war transition. It's classic. Now, whether it shapes up to that and it goes to full phase 6, I don't know, right? We're yet to see. But this is classic phase 5 to phase 6 transition. They've been building up these assets for generations. They've got all the wealth. They got all the, they might not know, Steve, actually, where the actual payments are coming from here. Not ultimately. It's probably several layers of NGOs and nonprofits and et cetera.
Well, that begs a bigger question. Why haven't they declared some of these nonprofits as terrorist organizations?
Well,
there's a simple solution there too, right?
Yeah.
And that's completely outside of Congress. We don't need Congress to do that. The president can sign an executive order declaring them a communist or a...
For the peasants like me, sorry to interrupt, Steve, does that always have to be a public thing? Is that something that ever happens, I don't know, classified, a designation? Do they have to come out openly and say this is a terrorist group, or can they quietly behind the scenes say Tommy's podcast is a terrorist group?
Well, they can seize their accounts, and they can, there's things they can do privately to seize the accounts, freeze the accounts at least, and then remove their IRS designations and other things. But, there's pallets of cash in this country to be used for these things right now. Point is that when you are in a late stage insurgency, the regime has to draw the insurgency out in the open so that everybody can see it for what it is.
Yeah.
Such that when the regime, I hate to use that term, but when the sitting power decides to use greater, escalate up to remove this threat, people, I think we talked this in the last conversation, the people are conditioned to go, no, there's a real insurgency. It's dangerous. It's violent. The government needs to deal with this thing. And then, Tommy, to your point, that's when you can now start yanking the designations of these NGOs. We do have, and Colonel Watkins and Murray, you're going to have to help me here, but I do believe we have foreign agent registration requirements in the United States.
We do. Yeah.
Right. So if you're acting on behalf of a foreign power or a non-U.S. entity or power, I think you have to register as a foreign agent. Yeah.
Well, technically you're supposed to.
Yeah. But again, to my point, I don't believe that the majority of this is foreign funded.
I agree.
No, this is all domestic.
And to your point about the funding, you are watching, to me, the closing up of those, because one of the most prolific funders of this was USAID.
Yeah.
The Institute of Peace was another one of those mechanisms. Those are gone. And so there is, on the bright side of this, there is a constricting of the current flow of money. To your point, Em, there is a lot of banked money in offshore accounts to do all of these operations. Do I believe that the moment Trump stepped foot in office, that this, what they had already tracked to exist, had been identified and is being monitored? I do. I think right now, to your point, what's going on is an exposure of, yes. And it's not coincidental that it happens at the same time all of the fraud was being exposed. Yeah. So to me, there is an exposure operation happening that probably one of the most well documented ones that they had was in Minnesota, Minneapolis, and the exposure of the fraud, and then immediately countering that is this insurgency in order to cover up that fraud. Because again, we have to keep this in perspective. I've seen lots of people saying, why is this only happening? Why is ICE so big in it? That's not the case. If you look at their activity and the arrest, the ICE is everywhere in the United States.
All over.
The difference is that the majority of the places that ICE is not in a Democrat layer with all of the corruption that surrounds the illegal alien statuses. I'm sandwiched in between two, Tampa and Orlando, and the difference is in the state of Florida, number one, you can't be a sanctuary city. And even the ones sympathetic, which is Tampa and Orlando, they have to turn people over to ICE. They don't have an option. And there's a huge ICE presence in Orlando right now.
Yeah.
But you don't have any of the hoopla going along with it because they have to turn them over. So the exposure has to happen in a place that has all of these other aspects to it in order for people to be able to see, to your point, EM, the visible insurgency.
Yes.
And it can only operate to the extent that it has in an area that coddles it.
Yes. Yeah. They tried this in Oregon, and they tried it, in Portland, and they tried it in Los Angeles. And so the National Guard went in, right? If, my suspicion in Minnesota, what's happening in Minnesota is it hasn't reached the level of threat yet where we need to move in the National Guard. In California, in Los Angeles, under Bass, who is a known color revolution CIA asset, the mayor of LA, and the mayor of Portland, which is where I was born, by the way. Those were both known as they would go to blood immediately. So you move the National Guard in quick, heavy forces. I don't know that Minnesota is going that way. Right, we haven't seen the National Guard move in there yet, as we did very quickly in LA and Portland. So, okay, what are we doing? What are we drawing out? Right, what other forces are in the area? And the other thing is, just because somebody has an account, bank account, somebody's funding some things, it doesn't necessarily rise to the level of a crime, right?
Well, if you're funding an insurgency, it does.
Yeah, but it's very hard to articulate an insurgency from, what is that saying? One person's freedom fighter is another's revolutionary, or, whatever that saying is, right? As I articulated before, and it's in the financial skill chain, when the Insurrection 6 made the statement that they did, that was a declaration of war. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that, you're going to have to draw all of that out now. And you want to do it in controlled areas. Well, Minnesota is perfect because it's winter. It's January, right? It's freaking January. You're not going to get, they're busing people in, and people can handle the cold, et cetera, but they're not going to get the mass numbers of people flooding in there in January when it's 20 degrees, right? That takes a certain kind of nut job, like us up in the north. So when the Insurrection said what they said, and then they doubled down here with, trying to get us to believe what unlawful orders are, they're fully committed. They're fully in. And so you have to draw that out, but you got to do it one pocket here at one point and pull that out. And there was all this cartel funding in LA. That's what they were really going after, right? Certain banks and cartel funds. I don't know exactly what they were going after in Portland, but that's what you do in this counterinsurgency when it's done right, not the shit we did in Afghanistan and Vietnam and elsewhere. But when it's done right, you do these little pockets where you attract all this out, you draw it out into the open, you get the people aware of that. And you don't always do it about the same kind of fraud or the same kind of insurgency or the same kind of corruption. And you draw that network out and you map it out, and then you shut that down, you move to somewhere else. And that becomes the new hotspot. And then you're drawing out some other aspect of the insurgency, some other networks, right? Because all these operate cellularly. That's the other piece of an actual insurgency, right? On the leadership side. And then you go somewhere else. So, where are we going after Minneapolis, people? Where's the ultimate reality TV show going next?
What?
Well, that's what this is, right? We're watching an ultimate reality TV show.
I thought you were asking. I was going to be like, Canada? I thought you meant for going further up.
No. But, Minneapolis isn't the last place. So we've had Los Angeles already. Now we've had Portland already. Now we're in Minneapolis. Where's the next great crime center? New York?
Potentially.
San Francisco, Sacramento, right?
So that's an interesting take. Then is so what went on in LA? They were per what you're saying, they would be much quicker to go to blood. So you move in the heavy.
Yeah.
And then if we apply that to Minneapolis right now, it's the absence of the National Guard, which actually, per this, would indicate it's not as bad versus someone like me. I speak for the peasants and the civilians. I look at it as like Trump weakness. I'm like, why aren't you going in? Versus what you're saying. I'll put it this way. You go to the emergency room, there's always a sign. It goes, if you're waiting, thank the Lord. Because it means it's not really an emergency. It's when you walk in there and they go, we need him now. That guy might die. So that's
they had the National Guard in Minneapolis, but if you remember, there was a court decision that said, which is still being contested and appealed, that they couldn't use them there. So that was the original plan.
Well, let's also, what did Waltz do? Waltz went out and articulated he was going to use the National Guard against the federal forces.
Which again, to me, is part of that exposure.
Correct.
Operation, because
yes,
you are, and honestly, I have to say, they're really retarded. I don't know how else to say it. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that while you were drinking. That they can't see what is crystal clear.
They don't care. It's not that they can't see it.
Or they can see it, and they're lower management, and they're like, I have to do this, or I'm going to get shot in the
Well,
head.
it's worse than that. It's that they can see, but they've been protected for so. It gets back to something I said earlier, or actually it was with Sean and Steve in the conversation we had. Bitches ain't been getting throat punched in a long time.
True.
I was waiting for, bro.
Right, and so problem is bitches don't think they're ever going to get throat punched.
Well,
that's the problem.
Yeah, when you bubble this up, and by the way, my apologies, I got a rural security incident going on. When you bubble this up to the national level, Colonel Watkins is right. There has to be exposure for the public to see the insurgency in its purest form, and there has to be a series of events so people can see the level of violence that they're capable of. That's all playing out. But when you bubble it up to the national level, you're also seeing the controlled assets at the national level, the seditious six and all the others that the public has to see. And I can't help but think that there's a broader agenda here to show that this is not only an insurgency at the local level, this is a national level effort to turn the country into
it's a color revolution.
Exactly
that we're actually on the receiving end of our own. Colonel Watkins, to your point, we're not on the receiving end of a foreign color revolution, where this is our own on our own.
And Colonel Watkins is right about the fact that this is being funded here on our shores.
Oh, it's domestic. This is domestic. There is nobody better at doing this than us. Right.
Well, so here's where my bitterness and, strong psychotic hatred of the CIA comes in play. And that is, why are they still, why isn't Radcliffe in front of the president going, here's what we're doing to find out who the belly buttons are behind this? And why isn't he out on the national stage saying the CIA is doing everything they can to go after the people that are foreign entities, because, they're not supposed to operate here on U.S. soil.
Title 10.
That's against U.S. Title 10 and U.S. Title 50.
Or, 50.
I think that's vaguely important. But that said, why isn't he on the national stage? Why isn't the DNI on the national stage talking about it?
He'd be dead.
So what?
Praetorian problems are very real. Well, their kids will be dead.
Yeah,
right? So people we need. Well, but hang on a second. It doesn't mean that people just send their kids into the meat grind. What we do need to understand is there is a very real Praetorian problem. They have no problem assassinating people.
I hear you.
None.
I'm not disagreeing with you at all.
Yeah, sorry,
that's me disagreeing.
Yeah.
That's me
Colonel
saying,
Watson,
I don't care. You took the oath. This is a war. Casualties are in war. And we're like you said, we're moving from phase 5 to phase 6. This is vaguely important right now. If you don't want this to go to phase 6, then you need to step out in front. And if you're not willing to do that, get the fuck out of the way.
Okay. Can I say something about the CIA?
You do all day, every day. So of course you can.
Literally all day.
And it's brilliant stuff too, by the way, just so.
So I think that inside of the CIA, the very few times that they had a director that was not part of the entity, there was a mapping out that was attempted inside of the agency because they can control and monitor all comms. So we don't know that that's not happening on the inside of the CIA. That is obviously, we're not at the point of the revelations of that infrastructure. But in the past, every time a foe was put in the White House that for whatever reason they decided they didn't like, and in the one case, when Jimmy Carter fired over 800 of the covert operatives on the Halloween massacre night, October 31st, 1977, I believe, it just picked up and set up in what they referred to as the enterprise and continued operating. And in that case, George H.W. Bush, because Jimmy Carter wouldn't allow him to stay as the director, went over to Kenya and set up the Safari Club with Adon Khashoggi and all of these other people, to include the Saudi government and a whole bunch of other Middle Eastern operatives, and ran the CIA out of it. That's the same thing that Dulles did when he was fired. There wasn't anything that happened post Dulles that he was not involved in, to include the assassination of JFK. They all ran everything by him. And so this octopus, to call it Danny Casalero's term, is capable of existing both inside the CIA and outside the CIA because of all their front companies and covert elements. And so I don't want people thinking that I have no idea whether Radcliffe is good or bad. Most of what, if he's the White House hat that I hope he is, most of what he would be doing inside of the CIA to minimize their official capability would not be visible to any of us.
So the CIA, when we think CIA, we think Langley. 99% of the CIA operations are guys that aren't badged anymore and never go to Langley and don't need government appropriations, right? Black or double black side, and haven't needed for 50 years, because that's what all the human and drug trafficking is about. To say nothing about stock manipulation. They make more money off stock market manipulation than they do trafficking. 10 times what they make off of the 2 trillion roughly a year in human drug trafficking. They make 10 times that a year in stock manipulation through all the private, who created private equity. Private equity and investment banking was created by the CIA, the same people who created the CIA. We didn't have these before. So they make more money off of all that, destroying companies and jacking stocks up, et cetera. They don't even need the illicit drug and trafficking monies anymore. We can cut all that off. They're still making $10 trillion a year, $20 trillion a year off stock markets. And I've run across these guys my whole life, literally since I was young in San Francisco, right? In the Bay Area, San Francisco. And then even in Northern Washington, Seattle, et cetera, you run across these guys all the time. They're former CIA or former CIA contractors, And now what do they do? Very much to Colonel Watkins, what you're saying, most of them have contracts and they provide security, or they have some kind of job where they get paid retainers from 4 or 5 different CIA-owned companies. This is the Praetorians. We need to stop calling them the CIA. Well, we can call them the CIA, but it does mix up the guys in Langley. Some of might trying to be doing the right thing, and we do still need an external facing intelligence capability. And we don't need the operational side of things. That's what Eisenhower's trying to do, because the Green Berets were established to be the operational side under the Department of Defense, so that there was separate lines of control, and that operationally these things that we needed to do clandestinely and covertly would have this military oversight. And that didn't work out so very well. But the point is that what people really need to understand is that when we're talking about the CIA, we're not talking about Langley. And we're not talking about mostly at all any of the guys that are green badged. or blue badged. What we're
I'd still
talking
like to
about,
stick with my generic, psychotic hatred and generalization because it fits my narrative.
it
So,
makes you so adorable too,
as
Steve.
much as I'd like to just, shed any responsibility for the GSs that are at the CIA.
Well, the
But
point
I
being
know
is that
exactly what you're saying.
we could
I
make the
completely
CIA
agree.
go away. We could defund it. We could remove it. We could, salt the,
Well,
nuke. We
you're
could
right.
Rezhnik Langley.
Yeah, but what do we suck at the most? We suck
We
at
wouldn't
human
get rid of it.
intelligence, right?
We wouldn't get
we
rid of
need the
it.
human intelligence regardless, right? And by the way,
Yeah.
Colonel Watkins, that was a fantastic body of work on Dallin Dulles. Some of that I didn't even know, and I was shocked when I read it. So good body of work on that.
So thank you. Let me just say something to EM about his reference now twice to Eisenhower. Eisenhower was the first quasi-NATO commander. He was the guy in charge of Europe during the creation and transfer of the German stay-behind networks to NATO. He was fully aware. As a matter of fact, he sent his chief of logistics to Operation Sunrise to arrange the transfer. Eisenhower was never opposed to covert operations at all, and he was not opposed to using them while he was president. As a matter of fact, he used them repeatedly. He is the one that signed the National Security Action Memorandum to overthrow Iran, to overthrow Guatemala, and to murder Patrice Lumumba. He had no problem using them, and he had no problem not using the Green Berets.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting things that happened in Korea where the CIA went completely against Eisenhower. So I agree very much that Eisenhower had absolutely no problems as a general, as a warfighter of using assassination and covert operations.
Yeah.
But I also believe that he himself, I believe that they killed Patton as a warning to Eisenhower. You will do these things.
And obviously we don't have any proof of that, but I certainly would agree with that because that is part of their mode of operation of sending those warnings.
They were best friends as well, and they've been best friends for 20 some odd years. And if he was going to have somebody who could go against, marshal the men to go against this thing, it would be Patton. Yeah,
and the book that's The Devil's Chessboard, which is primarily about Alan Dulles, very much shows the courting of Eisenhower after he got off active duty by the Dulles brothers, which is why they both ended up in his administration. Yeah. He definitely was lockstep with them.
Well, again, I don't know. I don't disagree with you at all. That again, though, what people really need to understand is this Praetorian problem. Just because people are going along with these things and appear doesn't mean that there isn't people getting assassinated around them as a warning that if you don't, we'll kill your kid next. And those things happen, right? Reagan. Why did Reagan get shot? Well, Reagan was trying to shut down Iran-Contra. He wasn't trying to stop what was happening. He was just, we need to shut that operation down because it's too public, it's too, et cetera. Well, they didn't want to do that. So they shot him. And his tune changed after that. Right? We didn't hear any more about shutting down Iran-Contra or any of the other kinds of things that he shifted to, domestic policy and economics and kind of stayed away from international stuff after that. Well, except for Star Wars, right? Funding Star Wars and bankrupting the Soviet Union and that whole boondoggle, which Steve, very much to what you and I were arguing about this morning, that's the panopticon con, right? The great con is this illusion that we have all this technological superiority and we're in total control.
Well, that's why we suck at human, right? It's because we put so much emphasis on it. It was, it was one of my pet peeves when I was still in active duty, especially at the Army CERT. We spent billions of dollars on all these freaking tools, and General Umpty Frats doesn't understand line 4 some PowerPoint that's completely irrelevant to the 250,000 endpoints that are on fire. And it shows you just how archaic the whole system is. And part of our discussion this morning was me saying that I think the tech bros are tuning Palantir software, or trying to tune Palantir software for this pre-crime stuff, right? This is a perfect opportunity for them to do that, and they would do it, right? When Larry Ellison goes out on the White House on day 2 of the administration to talk about mRNA vaccines and all the rest of it, they've already got most of this system built, and they think that it's somewhat viable, so they need a place to test it. And it wouldn't surprise me at all that DHS is being manipulated as much as the left's being manipulated for cause and effect, so they can tune and teach their AI how to spot and profile these operatives. It wouldn't surprise me at all. Now, EM and I agree that, number one, that from a technological and an infrastructure perspective, there's no way they're going to be able to build the grid that they think they're going to build. So we definitely agree on that. But I definitively think the tech bros are in the background somewhere in some way influencing events on the ground. Now, if it's directly or indirectly, doesn't really matter. But I can't see that DHS and ICE are this incompetent without help and somebody directing.
Sorry, I think they are this incompetent because that's what we've been recruiting and hiring for and training our young for. Sometimes chaos is just chaos.
I'll give you the benefit of the doubt on
right?
that one.
Sometimes chaos is chaos. And Colonel, I want to Colonel Watkins, terribly sorry. I want to go back to this Praetorian thing, because when I've been looking at history and looking at decisions that don't seem to make sense, given what we know about the person. And then, looking at, and this goes all the way back to the 1600s and, the English speaking world, when they killed the Kennedys, what did that prove irrefutably? And they killed a bunch of other people too, and kidnapped people and all that other stuff in the 60s and 70s. In our own country, Gettys and Hearst and, others. Were I going to remove the CIA, this broader superordinate organization, the Praetorians, I would have to make sure that my security is absolutely rock solid. And that would be a vast Herculean task when what I'm up against are people who know how to get around and through those things to still kill you.
I don't disagree with that. And to Steve's earlier point about the CIA, I've made this point often. To me, during the years of ill management of the CIA, for example, when Brennan was there, the way the hierarchy works in the CIA, people have asked me, are they all bad? I have no information that indicates that they all are bad, but the division chiefs, the branch chiefs and above, in order for them to operate, they are hired by the next level, which is hired by the next level, which is hired by the director. And so when you understand that at least 4 layers deep in the CIA, they are all brought up where they can last a 4-year period of time under a non-compliant director, but they're institutionalized bad at the mid-level and above. That doesn't mean that someone can't operate at the GS-12 level and below for 25 years as an analyst and deal just in their job jar and be bad, because that's we all know. I mean, I spent 30 years in the military and never heard of anything that I now know. So you can have people functioning at certain levels because, as we all know, classified information is compartmentalized for a reason, and they can operate at different levels. And to the point that, and that's why Minneapolis is so important. You can see how brainwashing real time is happening. These people have been brainwashed both through an educational system and through their associations, and manipulated psychologically, which is why, again, you go back to the CIA and the masters of, and that's why I tell people there's no right and left. Some data Republican who I absolutely love was saying about this that the CIA is basically extreme leftists. They're not. They're psychological warfare experts to project a left and a right, and they manipulate both. And if you don't understand that, you really aren't on at the big boy table. They are expert psychological warfare manipulators that create illusions of things that exist. I just told you one of the biggest funders of the Albert Einstein Institute was the Republicans. They knew what they were doing. John McCain and Lindsey Graham was on the ground during the Ukrainian Maidan coup. This is not a left and right thing. And people just get that out of their head.
The only thing the left and right are two different status hierarchies of the same thing, right? They're two artificial status hierarchies. So people align themselves with one set of status hierarchical system, Republicans, and the other one orients themselves they orient themselves to another status hierarchical system called the Democrats. And the conflict between the two provides this illusion of something that isn't real. But the way in which the psychological manipulation happens is that those are two different status hierarchy systems. And if you conduct yourself in certain ways on one, on the Republican side, you earn status in these ways. On the Democrat side, if you conduct yourself in accordance with this, you earn status in the Democrat side. And then it's just this constant artificially generated conflict between the two based off of the competing status hierarchy systems that keeps this illusion that we have a government. And this isn't just happening at the federal level. This is happening at, this is liberal democracy writ large. I've written about this. This is why liberal democracy was, the nobility and the principalities were eradicated from the world, down with princes, is so that this illusionary sovereignty system, these two competing status hierarchies, artificial status hierarchy systems, could be put in place to provide the illusion of self-rule.
Yes.
Right. And people on the, where we are right now, like the piece I wrote this morning about martyrdom and about what are these people doing? Well, where we are at is we're at a place to where the only way for people to earn ultimate status on, as you're saying, the illusionary left is to go and get killed by a cop who's conducting his job lawfully.
Yeah, to put that in a more, because I always am a visual person. When I first started doing this research, to me, when I delved into the secret societies like Skull and Bones and the production of these managerial Praetorian Guard controllers, it's almost like in that tomb that, in a very basic sense, they had, when we were little kids, we used to draw straws. That's literally what it is. There's two sides of straws. There's a long one and a short one. And if you get a long one, you're going to be a Republican. And if you get a short one, you're going to be a Democrat. There's no difference between them.
It's Morpheus in the Matrix, red pill, blue pill.
Yeah, they all
choose which one.
They're all going to manipulate us in order to serve the oligarchy. That's literally what their roles are.
To earn status, right? To earn status from the oligarchs. Yeah, terribly sorry, Steve. Go ahead.
No. Warren Beatty had the best quote in the movie Shooter. There's no such thing or left or right, Democrats or Republicans. There's the haves and the have-nots. Yeah, well, that is exactly what it is.
There was the meme, right? Native American is like left wing, right wing, same bird.
Yes.
No,
same bird.
Same bird.
It's at the end of Shooter. Yeah, they like us down there, boy. Yeah, that guy. Yeah, there's the haves and the have-nots.
But that's exactly how it is. And most people are still wrapped up in, I listen to, a lot of social media voices. They're all saying the same thing. Well, the Democrats.
This is why I think
left and right. I always thought it was a construct because it's all It's all carefully curated nonsense.
It's
right?
all theater.
Yeah,
It's the theater,
exactly.
right? It's the theater and the macabre, right? So I genuinely believe this very firmly. I believe we are watching the death of liberal democracy.
Oh, absolutely.
I believe it is eating
Absolutely.
itself as it always has. Every time this, and okay, so now what are they trying to transition us to? Steve, to your point, the tech bros are trying to hardcore transition us to computationalism, right? To this whole computationalist belief system. I've written on that as well. Okay, well, let's see if they can do it. I don't think they can, because thermodynamically it's not possible, but it is thermodynamically possible to fake it, right?
Everything else is fake.
Why not? Yeah, right. So I suspect.
Well, we have to say that correctly. It's woke, retarded, fake, and gay.
Woke, retarded,
Okay.
fake, and gay.
Yes, fake, retarded, fake, and gay.
Yeah, that's
retarded.
my
Right.
that's my political party.
Tommy's
RFAG.
political party.
RFAG.
We
Retarded,
need
fake, and
we
gay.
need patches, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll work on that.
Generally, what happens is, historically in these types of situations, is that the power struggle between the oligarchs and their managerial factions gets out of, becomes so visible that the people, the Wizard of Oz, right? People see the wizard behind the curtain. Enough people do. And so then it's a matter of, well, are we able to actually continue with this illusion of liberal democracy, or does it die? And I don't think we know the answer to that yet. I don't think we're going to know the answer to that till the end of the next decade, probably.
Go ahead, Colonel. I know exactly where you're going. I want to hear it.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're well past whether or not it's visible enough. It's been made crystal clear. And those of us who have exited the matrix are not going back in. So
yeah, and that's okay. So
We've
now
passed
what do
the
they have to do?
culmination
Now
point.
they have to
That's for
take it to
sure.
violence to scare the cattle back into the pen.
yeah, that's not going to happen. Not
like
in the
your-
United States.
I like
And
your attitude. You're
that's
spunky.
not going to happen. I'm telling you.
No.
That's why I believe all of this has been accelerated because of Trump, and we are well past the reason why all of these other countries have been monkeyed with to perfect their mechanisms and how they're going to manage these operations. Geographically, the United States stood alone. Not only do we have more weapons in the hands of citizens than the entire military of everybody else around the world, but we also are the most independent thinking people collectively. That doesn't mean we don't have our own morons, but collectively, we are harder to shuttle onto a cattle car. And I see that. I mean, that's to me what COVID was all about, to test the pliability of people mentally and physically. I think all of these things are, and they had to be so rushed out because of what was going on and the threat of Trump getting a second term, that the curtain didn't get pulled back. The curtain got ripped down. And it's completely exposed. And while I don't know the percentage, but there's enough now, because you guys know in psychological warfare that you only have to have less than 10% of the population in order to change the entire trajectory of the operation. And we're well past that.
Yeah. So I want to run something by you guys, because this is very much the thought. This is why I'm writing the novel As Rome Burns. Where does this go, and where is it? I suspect that the collapse happened in the 1960s when they killed the Kennedys. I think we went beyond and we did nothing about it, right? We let the lie go out there and we did nothing about it. I think liberal democracy died then in the 60s, and we've just been on momentum since. Because if you look at the acceleration, the expansion of the PSYOPs, and more importantly, how much energy and effort they've had to put into maintaining the illusion, and then it's still breaking down right in front of our eyes, I suspect that liberal democracy died in the 1960s, and we're just coming to the final end of this saculum where the 400 years of liberal democracy is over, and we can see it in Europe. I mean, look at the total, absolute tyrannical, completely non-liberal, not even the illusion of liberal democracy anymore in Europe and my beloved United Kingdom.
Yeah, like Trump pronounced it dead at Davos. He just came out and pronounced it dead. He didn't use the words liberal democracy. He just said globalism, right? Yeah. Which is synonymous with liberal democracy in their version. And I think the other part of the problem too that you're outlining, which I agree with, by the way, is they don't have a vision for the future.
No,
they don't know what they want society to look like on the other side, other than they want control. Right, all the autistic kids are in charge now, and they want to be in control because they got bullied as kids.
Well, I don't think they want. I don't think they want control. What they want to do is keep their stolen wealth. They want to be secure, and they want to sustain their stolen wealth, and they want to be secure. And they don't. Their understanding of how to remain secure is to keep the nation state together. Right, to maintain this liberal democracy lie, because that's how they made how they stole their wealth and created artificial wealth, and that's how they've been secured so far. So I don't believe it. Of course, there's always those, the resentfuls going for power, right? Of course, that's minimum 30%. But most of the others I know and talk to at different levels, et cetera, they just want to keep their stolen money, and they don't want it to devalue in any sense. Because they worship money, they worship wealth. That's their God. And they don't want their God to go away.
You realize how retarded that sounds, right?
Yeah.
Because they built a system where everything decays and nothing stays static, right? Even the money decays.
Well, it's second law of thermodynamics, right?
Right.
Reversibility. Yeah.
Right. And so they want everything to remain the same. It's just, it's physically impossible. But, the bigger issue is that they don't have a vision for the future. And that's why I think this will be completely different. Once we do move into phase 6, this will be a completely different animal than it has been in the past.
Wow.
And, I routinely get asked, what's going to be the catalyst? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what the catalyst is. What matters is when the catalyst happens, you recognize that that's what it is. And then you react accordingly.
I think the catalyst has already occurred. I think it happened 60 years ago. I think we're just in the reaction, to use chemistry terms. I think we're in the reaction that the catalyst kicked off in the 1960s.
Yeah, we've definitely passed the culmination point.
Yeah.
That's unequivocal.
So a couple of thoughts, and then I'm probably going to have to jump off. But as far as wealth goes, their power and control, their wealth is not in paper money.
Correct.
So nothing that they have their wealth invested in decays.
Yeah.
So that's just unequivocally true.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. Okay. So the end state that was articulated in the late 1800s by the Fabian Society that's kind of wired this entire thing was a very slow boiling pot where all of us frogs jump in and we're dead before we realize that we were in the pot. Was their end state was no nation states, a one world government, and they called it that verbatim, and that we were all going to be intermixed racial slaves.
Yep.
There was going to be them, and they were free to travel everywhere, and there was going to be a slave class.
Yes.
Catered to their needs that kept them in their wealthy statuses. Yeah. That is their ultimate end state.
Yeah, well, now they want to switch their slaves to robots because they find, again, Colonel, what you said about the non-compliance, right, Correct. Of COVID. They realize that, it's not even 7 to 10% non-compliant, it's 40%. And then as it went on, it rose up to 60% and got even higher. So now they realize, we can't even, we can't do the humans.
Trust those peasants.
Can't touch those peasants, right? Pitchforks and torches in the middle of the night.
But that's what I mean by they don't have a vision of the future because they.
Well, they do. We're gone.
Let me finish.
We're gone.
They didn't. Well, that's net zero, right? Net zero means no you. But to your point, Colonel Watkins, I agree with you. That's exactly what what I was trying to say is that they don't have a vision of the future that they could bring the public along with, right? Because
No. Yeah.
part
Oh,
of their vision,
absolutely.
the public has to buy
From us
into
what
it,
their
right?
agenda is. That's
Yeah,
why
yeah.
their symbol is a sheep in wolf's clothes. That
Yeah.
is the baby in society
Yeah.
symbol.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I think it's going to be different this time when this finally kicks off, because there's too many variables that
What people need to realize, though, is that in order to change this, the last time we had this fundamental change, it was 400 years ago, and it changed everything. And it was after 30 years of nonstop war. 30 years of nonstop war. Now, there's two balancing forces out there in the world, though, now that we didn't have 400 years ago. We didn't even have 80 years ago or 60 years ago. And that is a resurgent Russia and Russian civilization and resurgent China and Chinese civilization, neither of which they've both been taken through their collapse and survived. And they will never go back for that. Now, they're still trying to do the coup in China. I believe it's going to fail. I might or might not have been personally involved in taking British royals to China decades ago to link up with Hu Jintao and others. I think that's going to fail. And what that means, though, is that we have two very powerful countervailing forces to this regime and system. And we don't know exactly how that interplay is going to happen with all our oligarchs pushing for, our eradication and transition to robotic slaves versus hardware slaves versus wetware slaves that we are.
I think their plan fails at the end of the day.
Correct. Now, the problem is that, again, because that wealth that they have is our productivity. It is the theft of a century's worth of human labor and human life.
Yeah.
And so in order to maintain that wealth, they will still seek to try and wipe us out. And the way in which they do that is they start a civil war, a bloody, prolonged civil war. They don't want a real quick, like Spanish Civil War over in 3 years. They don't want an American Civil War over in, 4 or 5 years. What they want is a long, drawn out 20, 30-year civil war where we're just rolling in conflicts back and forth with one another and just wiping each other out.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
Doesn't mean they're not going to try.
That's true.
Doesn't mean you're not going to try. Yeah.
So we can keep Colonel Watkins. If you have to go, you can go. Not that you need my permission, but if you need to go, you can go. I think General Holt's going to still try to join us.
That's like your sergeant major saying, Colonel, you can go.
Yeah, what am I doing? You know what? This is the only fiefdom I have. Maybe I should double back and actually I am giving you permission. This is the only fiefdom I have.
I respect that, Tom.
Yeah.
But yeah, back to Steve, what you were saying about they don't have a vision for it. It's a poetic reflection or like a higher order fractal of kind of what we've seen with just take something that's relatively low stakes media, video games, movies, Netflix in the last 10 years. You really can. There's never any novel creation. All it is you're cutting it down. You're in a log cabin and you're just removing logs from the walls to build the fire. And in a small time zone, in a limited area, yeah, it looks like it makes sense. What does it matter? I'm making the fire. But anyone that has any concept of the bigger picture knows you're burning down you're not actually making new things. You're not building an addition to the house. You're not whatever. You're burning down the thing you have, and it works for a while until it doesn't. I think that's what we've been seeing through just all things remotely creative, artistic, whatever you want to call it. There's never been any novel creation. It's either a shitty remake or it's we take this thing and we turn someone gay or we give them fucking different hair or something. But there is no unique story, and not in the unique Joseph Campbell sense because there's a limited number of stories. But you get the point. It's like there's not a new creation. All it is a perversion or a shaving down of an old one, but it can only ever go one direction. And the inverse is, those that don't want to hoard everything, those that, a society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they know they won't sit under. Ironically, that's the thing that gives back. And it actually does give you shade that you didn't even think you were going to get because that wasn't your intention. I think that is why no matter what happens, and it could end absolutely horribly, but Yeah, I think you're right. They don't have a vision for what they want. All they know is that they want to keep what they have, and that never works in the history of ever. Of I
They
don't
Yeah,
want
you
do.
have
to.
you have
Yeah,
to have a clear vision of how you want
yeah,
Well, they
society to
do.
be
They
in
actually
this.
do, Steve. And this gets to, and Tommy, everything you're saying is absolutely the case, right? Steve, this gets to the back and forth we had this morning, messaging, right? They do have a vision, and it does get to your total control thing. Your concept and idea of their minority report future, right? What they do have is they have a vision of this computationalism as the new control mechanism, the new artificial reality of power and of omniscience and omnipotent power. It doesn't work. It doesn't work thermodynamically. It doesn't work technologically. It's just not possible according to the laws of physics. It's just not there. But they don't have to make it work. They just have to invest enough and do enough complicated, sophisticated things that we believe it works.
yeah.
And that's their intention. That's this whole computationalism thing. That's all the, AI, digital currencies, all of this that, making us believe that they are all powerful and all knowing and all seeing. It's also why they sell the CBD concept, the CBDCs. They know it won't work. It's why they sell the concept and the idea of total surveillance. They know it doesn't work because they've tried it, right? They sell the concepts and ideas of these things knowing full well they won't work, but now they're in our consciousness. And at least enough of us, even very intelligent people, believe it. And so what happens? They just switch the control collar from one illusionary system to another.
Turns to self-imposed governing, which is why I always
Right.
I think that
Self-enslavement.
I think
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
I think Snowden was the best thing that ever happened to the NSA.
Totally agreed.
Whether or not he was in on it
Yeah.
or he really did blow the whistle, it almost doesn't matter because the result is, man, they are watching your eyeballs through every license plate reader.
They're
That work
watching you
that,
through your routers. They're watching you through
and
everything.
it doesn't mean that they can't do that on individual bases. But man, if I'm the NSA, I'm like, this is the best thing that's ever happened to us.
Yes.
Guy runs out
Yeah.
and says stellar wins and they're, the X key score, they're tracking everything. If I'm the NSA, I'm like, let him run, let him go.
Well, there's a
He's
reason
great.
he's not. They didn't kill him.
Well, there's the other thing. Yes, he's employee of the year. Why would you kill
He's the
him?
employee of the year.
Yeah, yeah. And again, whether or not he is in on it or not, I don't
Correct.
think really
No,
matters.
you use the useful tools, right? Unwitting
Yeah,
assets, human assets are always the best.
yeah.
They're
Yeah.
always the best because they will never give up.
Well, he doesn't break
The
character because it's not a
operation,
character.
yeah, never, yeah,
Because he
never. 'Cause
fucking
they have
thinks
no
it's
idea.
he can't break character when same reason you don't tell the SR-71 pilot what it is they're filming. So when you're torturing them and chopping off their toes, if they completely break, they're like, I actually don't know. I actually don't fucking know. I'll start making up shit.
I say that's the reason why I can't remember anybody's name. It's
Yeah,
not true exactly, but that's what I say. That way, if I get rolled up, I can never give anybody up.
yeah.
The problem with it though is if you show me a photo, I'll be that motherfucker. I always
Yeah.
wondered what his name was. I've known him for 30 years.
Yeah, I mean, but that's that. So I
That
think
describes about half the military right there. In
Right?
that one statement.
Yeah.
I got to
So-
bounce. I need to
Yeah.
jump off, but
all right,
yeah,
we'll stay on for a couple more.
brother.
We'll stay on
Okay.
for a couple more minutes. See if
Yeah.
General joins us. I'll ping him right now. I'll just tell him it's me and EM. So then let's take that theorem then. It's just EM and I left. By that same logic, wouldn't it be because if we're saying that this applies to just power, like you said earlier, you don't want to use the term regime, but it's the correct term.
It's the correct
I have to
term.
like, it's the correct term.
Yeah.
Wouldn't this administration, this regime, wouldn't you want to apply that here and absolutely destroy Minneapolis so that everyone in every city thinks that that's coming if you get in front of an ICE vehicle?
No, because there are still 300 plus million people in this country, and that goes to pitchforks and torches in the night. This, what people really need to understand is any populace, any controlled populace, any group, even a family, is literally 3 bad decisions away from genociding itself.
Yeah, it's society's 4 meals away from total
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but even if we have all the meals, we just got all this. It's the book, The Eternal War, right?
But Flu's idea,
who just want to just, they want to burn it all down anyways. And so you're barely containing that ever. And so there is a reason the oligarchs function and operate in these indirect manipulative ways that they do, because in the times that they've tried to do tyrannical things, they get killed. Tyranny doesn't work very often, and it doesn't work for long. And in the end, usually the tyrants they and their families get slaughtered, their wealth gets taken, etc. So there's this delicate dance they have to do with this manipulation, control, assassinations, and that's not just always killing somebody, but, putting them in prison, impoverishing them, taking them from their family, et cetera. There's all kinds of ways to assassinate somebody. They can go on for living for 50 years broken, right? But there's this delicate, and again, this is the great game. The great game is this unbelievably complex thing. The architect talks about it in the movie The Matrix, the second one. And so the oligarchs, the nobility, are constantly in this delicate dance where if they get it wrong, they tune it wrong, it could get them killed. The people will come for them. And your enemies always, your competing enemies always telling the world, this is the piece I wrote this morning, right? How does estrogen work? Estrogen works, the estrogenic work very different than the testosteronic. And how is that? It's constantly telling the world how much of a tyrant you are, and then forcing you to a situation that every once in a while you're going to have to be a tyrant just to survive.
Yeah, make him the bad guy. And
then it's a matter of, okay, well, you got to do that careful, right? You got to do that real careful.
Yeah, it's like it's like the people on the right coming out and going, it needs to stop in Minneapolis. And I get it. I'm not saying you gotta cheer on someone's death, because there is a certain level. It's like, I have far left friends who are like, yeah, I think the people cheering on Charlie Kirk's death is disgusting. You're allowed to hate, and that's just me. I also have no military experience. Free to be labeled a pussy. That's fine. You don't have to cheer on the woman getting shot in the face. Yeah, on a human level, I'm like, that's at one point that she was a little girl running around, pitter patter on her parents. I'm a human. I get it. But to me, and it's kind of what I said this morning, is I just look at the last 5 years and you've seen what they want. Not only will they steal an election, not only will they raid Trump's house with orders to shoot to kill, not only will they try to blow his head off, not only will they pop Charlie Kirk in the jugular, stop aid going to Appalachia. I know personally the most qualified doctors on the planet who couldn't get an outlet anywhere, and they'd be like, well, we know Tommy will interview us, and it's like me in an apartment in Maryland, not even on YouTube, and they're like, he's our outlet. And you've seen them do all of that. I just have a very hard time, and I think Elon Musk said it, you wouldn't know Renee Good's name or the pretty guy's name. You would know nothing about it if an immigrant killed them. You would know nothing. Not only would it not be trending, it would actively be suppressed. So my point is we've seen it's no longer pearl clutching or hysteria. It is now provable U.S. history in the last 5 years, as documented through this podcast, what they are willing to do to you. And the only reason they didn't go farther is because they didn't think they could. That was it. There was no restraint. So I get on a human level looking at something and being like, I'm not going to cheer on this dude getting shot. Fine. Fair enough. That's your human soul. God bless. The people that are going, this needs to stop. You will not be shown that extension of moderation when they're back in power. And this, again, that's not hyperbole. That's based on the last 5 years. No part of them will ever be like, well, I know they think the election was stolen, but guys, we can't be throwing them in a jail with no due process. No, they cheered it on. You saw what they did to Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk was saying things you didn't enjoy, and you shot him in the neck, and you essentially, people were posting videos online where it looked like they were mid-orgasm. They're, he's dead. This is what they want. Yeah, I'm sorry that this guy was killed. I am.
I'm not.
And fair enough, but no, and I'm saying I'm sorry, and that I understand people are sorry. I don't care because I know what it is That this is not happening in a vacuum. This isn't a.
Okay, but here's the problem, Tommy. Here's the problem. Okay,
My point is saying I get where people might not like it. I understand that, but we already saw what they will do. They're going to do it in spades again.
Well, here's again, Tommy. Here's the problem we have. Okay, the problem that we have is that the greatest force in the world is not courage; it's cowardice.
Yeah,
and cowardice coupled with this powerful, so and that's always been the way. So what did the brain do who knows, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of years ago? It wired in cognitive dissonance circuitry and cognitive biases to protect the coward from their own cowardice.
Yeah.
And so the problem is that, and I hate to say this, but some people very close to me, family members, right, who are very intelligent otherwise, they don't see what you see. They don't see this. Their brain convinces them that those things that happened, that you articulated, were all justified, or that they didn't happen at all, that it's all made up. And the problem is, I've seen this, directly. People can watch and see the most atrocious thing and not see it at all, because that's how the brain protects itself. And that's how the brain of cowards protect the cowardice. They can't see it. And if they see it, then they moral relativistically rationalize it away. They don't have to do that consciously. It's the brain does it immediately. I've watched it in people, in their eyes, right?
Oh, I've watched some of my best friends over the years on the podcast. I mean, quite literally say the words. I think, when I'm like, yeah, I have an issue, not doing these episodes because there's all these cases of people emailing me saying, my 9-month-old died and the autopsy showed a foot-long clot. And I'm like, hey, dude, that's not, I have to say, and I've literally had some of the closest people in my life, family and friends, say along the words of the following: if you want your show to grow on YouTube, I think you just got to play ball.
Yeah.
Hey, man, I get if somebody's like, hey, dude, if you dial back the F-bombs, maybe you'll get more ad rev. Hey, fair enough. And if I don't do it, that's ego. That's me being, a pompous ass. Fair. Yeah. Stuff like that. And then it never came up again. No one cares. I never got hey, that thing you were saying, it's now actually being tweeted by, the thing you got banned from YouTube for? The official CDC Twitter now says that as fact. There's none of that. And if you show it to them,
the problem is that cognitive biases, there's over 287, I think. Formal is a great chart online, right? Cognitive biases, cognitive dissonance circuits, and cowardice all go together.
Start winning.
And that is the control that is what creates mass formations. That's how mass formations are created.
My biggest episode ever, mass formation psychosis.
Right. And so this is the self-enslaving control collar we just keep putting on ourselves. And the problem that we have is that estrogenics are cowards, and they are by far larger numbers. They're the resentfuls, as I write about in The Eternal War. And so unfortunately, or they're adoptables, right? And they're not going to stand up. The problem is the people that are capable of looking at the monsters and recognizing that they're a monster and that monster needs to be dealt with are a very small percentage. It's maybe 20 at any given time. At its maximum, maybe only 30% of people. Maybe. And the problem is then we, 20, 30%, live in the world of the cowards and the malevolent.
And it's not as simple as, all right, there's only 20% of you. The other 80% are actively told by the 1% that's toxic masculinity, that's dangerous, it's
all our fault. And the cowards go along with it because they don't want to get involved. They don't want to.
It's a brilliant game. They're either too stupid to understand it or they do understand it, but at their core, they don't care. It's group validation.
They don't. The vast majority of them. So here's the other thing. At some point, they do know.
They know, yeah.
At some point, but that's when cognitive dissonance kicks in. So again, the human brain is wired. The vast majority of humans' brains, so you have the resentful brain who's just wired for malevolence, brilliant malevolence. That's about 30%. You've got the responsible's brain, which is wired for, monster hunting, right? Gameplay and monster hunting. And that's maybe about 20%. And then you've got the full spectrum of the other 50% of humanity in between. The problem is that that 50% of the spectrum is why their primary, what moves them through life is their cowardice that is thereby protected in them and justified in them with cognitive biases and cognitive dissonance.
And if you want to on a purely Darwinian, through a purely Darwinian lens, they're not even in the technical sense incorrect. By virtue of the fact they're still alive, in a Darwinian sense, they're not wrong.
Correct.
They're biological. Now you and I can look at that and go, ethically, morally, you are a fucking waste. Your ancestors scoff at you. You're
not even alive.
You're less than a used condom. Yeah. But in terms of it grows, go tell a fungi that you don't respect it.
Yeah.
But keep growing.
Yeah. This is why also, when I wrote The Eternal War, this is a eternal conflict between the responsibles and the resentfuls over the cowards in the middle.
Which I think we've talked about, that does make you start to wonder, like, as a meta system, this might actually be the most selected for thing, where you have the assholes and you have the guys trying to fight the assholes. It's a self-improving gain of function meta lab, and then the masses are the retards who keep the gears running so that the other guys can play. It's two sets of operators with a massive set of enablers and technicians and cooks and delivery and logistics, and the two operators are going at each other. And it's not zero sum, because over time they get better and better at better and better, and they make the whole thing more lethal. Who knows? Maybe we find life on another planet and we are just like, bar none, we are like the delta force of biological life. They're like, what the? Maybe you go to every other planet and it's like mostly peaceful. And we're like, how the history of life is war? And they're all like, what are you talking about?
That's the meme, right? When aliens go by our planet, they lock the doors.
Oh yeah, they don't. They go by. They lock the doors quietly. Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, that's what they do. In that case, man,
all life would be this way, though, right?
Oh yeah.
All life would have to be this way, otherwise it wouldn't achieve a certain sufficiency of complexity. So, even in its very early single-celled stages. So, this isn't something humans came up with. We see this in all species.
Or is it? And that's why we don't see anything. Now, I get there's a ton of limitations to the Fermi paradox, mostly our own limited, technology.
Sensory capabilities.
But let's say that wasn't. Maybe all life isn't this. Maybe they are all kumbaya, and the second things get bad, they don't know how to handle it, and they die out.
The problem is it's not possible with the laws of physics that we know, because the disequilibrium of energies, dissipative structure emergence, and all of that comes out of chaos, right? Comes out of conflict and chaos, or it doesn't emerge at all. So unless they're living in pockets of the universe that have very different fundamental physics and chemistry, it's all life's going to be this way.
Yeah, and at that point, we've thrown out Occam's razor. Like, well, maybe it exists if the laws of physics. It's like, hey, man. At a certain point, it's like, well, the odds work. If this happens, hey, it's much more likely that it's this.
Yeah,
right?
It's like, you can go get high all you want, buddy, and come up with your own laws of physics. And
I'm not saying it's bad. It's fun. It's fun, but it's not this.
Yeah.
Well, I'm doing Altman show, and actually a little bit with Will Tanner, so I gotta get ready for that. Awesome. I'm guessing General Holt's thing ran over. All good. Cool. Well, yeah, dude, appreciate your time. I'll get this up immediately, and for everybody listening, please go in the description, follow all their Twitters, YouTube, Substacks, blah 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 blah. EM's books are in the description. EM, thank you for your time.
See you,
dude.
buddy.
Take care. Hey guys, real quick, you guys know Basil Baz, ARC, the Association for the Recovery of Children. I just did a fundraiser with them the other day, and I'm going to put this on to every episode I do. They are special forces veterans who physically rescue trafficked children. They have since 1993. They have a 100% success rate. They do not take salaries. They all have day jobs, and they literally rescue sex trafficked children. Donations to them are a tax write-off. I get nothing from them, and they have not asked me to put this on. I've included this little clip on episodes for the last year or so, and I'm just re-recording it because I just got to meet him just 2 days ago for future. It's November 25th, 2025, but this will be on every episode now for the next year. And there is nothing better you can do with your money. If you can support them for even $5, please do that. It is, they truly are doing the Lord's work, and I think we all have an obligation to do that. Thank you so much.
Higher ultraviolet exposure is associated with lower mortality. The United Kingdom is a high latitude and low sunlight country. Researchers there collected data on over 360,000 participants in a study of UV exposure via solarium use. When compared with non-users, solarium users had 15% risk lowered of all-cause mortality, 23% lower risk of cardiovascular mortality, 14% lower risk of cancer mortality, and a 12% lower risk of non-cardiovascular, non-cancer mortality. In other words, all other causes. Quoting the researchers, our study adds to the growing evidence that the benefits of UV exposure outweigh the risks in low sunlight environments. A link to the original publication is available in the box below the video. Get some UV light this winter. Immerse yourself in the tranquility of the blue. Visit a blue room soon. www.blueroom.com.
Hey guys, a huge sponsor of the show is Heaven's Harvest Prepper Food. Clayton lives down in Georgia. He's been on the show before. It's actually nearby where I went to college. They are a huge sponsor of the show. They give me some money every month, even when I don't sell enough to warrant that paycheck. Meaning that the show is not free. It's just that it's free for you. If you guys need prepper food, or if you're just interested in supporting the show, I'd please ask you to go to the link in the description. Go to Heaven's Harvest Prepper Food, promo code TPC for 10% off. 72 servings per pail, 25-year shelf life. These things are, they double as dumbbells. Pasta Primavera, cheesy potato soup, mac and cheese, loaded baked potato casserole, chili mac, cheddar broccoli soup, cheesy lasagna, teriyaki rice. You can get banana chips. There's also raspberries, strawberries, and apples. There's a bunch of freeze-dried fruit, or you can even get seeds to plant your own garden. It's not a bad thing to have. It's like gold or ammunition. It's a good thing to have. It's a bad thing if you have to use it, but it's good. It's good to have it, not need it, than need it, not have it. So that's what I'd say. And if you just want to support the show, please go to the link in the description. Please go support them because they support me. Thank you so much, guys.